Whenever a new Star Trek show comes out, there are always people who don't like it, which is fine. The Star Trek franchise is nothing but a collection of individual TV series and movies united by the fact that they are set within the same fictional universe and are all about roughly the same sort of thing. The future, outer space, aliens, exploration, arguing about ancient philosophical questions and moral dilemmas at long tables or from behind lecterns, Star Trek shit. And like any other TV show that has ever been made or ever will be made, whether someone likes or doesn't like a Star Trek show is totally subjective. It's a matter of opinion. And there will always be some people in the audience who don't dig it for any of a potentially infinite number of reasons. However, when the new show in question is a Star Trek show, there is one particular response that one defender or another of that new show will always inevitably offer in response to criticisms or crybaby fanboy tantrums. That response, hey, don't worry, it's the first season. It's Star Trek. All Star Trek series have bad first seasons. Do all Star Trek series actually have bad first seasons? I think it's only fair to ask because that is a broad, in fact, a universal declaration. All Star Trek series have bad first seasons? All of them? You know what that is? That is a sweeping generalization, and sweeping generalizations are always bad. Fortunately, there's a really easy way to test this claim. As of the making of this video in March of 2026, there have been a total of 12 Star Trek series, counting both live action and animated, those produced for traditional television and those produced more recently for streaming services. 12 shows! It seems to me all one has to do in order to prove or disprove this assertion is to take a look at the first seasons of all 12 Star Trek shows and see if all of them are, in fact, the shits. If even one of them is not the shits, then this widely held belief within the fan community will be shown to be false, as hard as that sort of thing may be for you to imagine. But that's a little too black and white of a question to justify a video essay of this, I'm just presuming here at the beginning, length. After all, if I decide that the first season of the first Star Trek series I consider isn't bad, no idea what the odds are of that, that settles it. Even if every other first season of a Star Trek show is bad, it wouldn't be all of them, and the statement would be false. So, as I make my way through the 12 Star Trek shows that currently exist, I'm also going to keep a running tally of which shows have bad first seasons, and which ones have first seasons that are at least better than bad, to see if there is any reasonable basis for this they all have bad first seasons belief at all. Since it is a totally subjective question, who decides whether a season is good or not? I do, because this is my video. I'm not just going to declare a season good or bad. I'll try and articulate why I have whatever opinion I have, and if you have a different opinion, please share it with everyone in the comments. The point of a video like this isn't to provide a definitive answer. It's a question of opinion and therefore can have no definitive answer. The point is to take the question as a jumping off point to talk about Star Trek and share our opinions, but mostly my opinion. Okay, let's get started. The first Star Trek series, which, if memory serves, is called Star Trek? How's its first season? Among the notable episodes in Season 1 of Star Trek, the original series, are The Man Trap, which was the series premiere, Charlie X, The Corbomite Maneuver, Balance of Terror, The Galileo 7, Arena, Space Seed, The Devil in the Dark, Errand of Mercy, and, oh yeah, a little show called The City on the Edge of Forever. Those are just some of the highlights, but that's quite a list. I just named 9 episodes out of a 29-episode season that are generally considered to be among the best episodes the show ever produced. And as for the other 20, they're not all classics, to be sure, but the worst ones are underwhelming or forgettable rather than outright bad, and most of the rest are still pretty good, if not excellent. There's another bit of fandom folk wisdom that takes the one from this video a step further and says that Star Trek shows don't start getting good until season 3. Star Trek, the original series, flips that upside down. Its first 2 seasons are very, very strong, and it doesn't get bad until its third and final season. And even then, it's still got an ace or two up its sleeve. That's neither here nor there. The point is, the whole all Star Trek shows are bad at first belief doesn't apply to the original series and didn't get started there. It didn't get started with the next series in the franchise either. That would be Star Trek TOS's first sequel, the Saturday morning cartoon series that was also titled simply Star Trek, but which these days we usually refer to retroactively as Star Trek the Animated Series. There were 22 episodes produced in total, but those episodes were broadcast in 2 seasons, and only the first 16 episodes were included in the first season, the remaining 6 being broadcast as the second season. Though the animated series gets a lot more appreciation nowadays than it did when I was growing up in the 1980s and 90s, which is nice, it's still mostly an interesting oddity. I like it quite a lot myself, and I'm always glad to see it included in discussions like this when it fits, but I'm not sure I'd call it good in the same way that, for example, Star Trek the original series is good. Not that it's bad. In certain very specific ways, it's actually better than TOS. I'm not complaining about that half-hour episode length. There are a few TOS episodes that might have benefited from that shorter running time. But even its best episodes have a ceiling imposed on their quality by the budget, the low expectations that came with its Saturday morning time slot, and the often indifferent-sounding performances of its voice cast. Still, the question isn't whether or not Star Trek the Animated Series was good. The question is, does it have a bad first season? And my answer to that is no, it doesn't. The quality of the animated series is pretty up and down throughout both seasons. If you don't like the show, you probably don't think much of either season, but if you, like me, have a soft spot for the show, I bet you think the first season is the stronger of the two. Season 1 of the animated series is where we find almost all of the best, or at least the most memorable episodes, Yesteryear, which is outstanding, and the one episode of the animated series you really should watch if you haven't, More Tribbles, More Troubles, which is the sequel to TOS's The Trouble with Tribbles, written by David Gerrold, who also wrote the original. The Infinite Vulcan, which isn't a great episode, but does feature the gigantic clone of Spock, who has become one of the most enduring images associated with the show. And The Magics of Megas 2, the episode that presents Lucifer. Yes, that Lucifer, as a good guy who has been vilified and persecuted by humanity. Up yours, the Bible! I respect that. I think both Star Trek the original series and Star Trek the animated series have good first seasons. With the animated series, it's more of a relative judgment, but even so. That seems to disprove the assertion that Star Trek shows all have bad first seasons, but in a way it doesn't, because Trekkies didn't start saying that, or at least I didn't start hearing it, until the 1990s. The they all have bad first seasons thing started not with classic Trek or the animated series, but with the show that is still revered by many as the crown jewel of the entire franchise, Star Trek The Next Generation. Did TNG have a bad first season? Oh, Jesus Christ, yes. Yes, Season 1 of TNG, fuck. Yes, it was awful. Season 1 of TNG was so bad, it's a miracle it went on to become such a good show. It's a miracle on 2 levels, actually. It's a miracle that a show which got off to such a rotten start was soon able to turn itself around and start pumping out good episodes on a regular basis. And it's a miracle the show even got the chance to do that at all. It's a miracle after the first season finished that the studio didn't burn the negatives and hope everyone would just forget that the show had ever existed. TNG begins with Encounter at Farpoint, which to this day is still far and away the worst pilot episode of any Star Trek series. It follows that up with The Naked Now, a poorly conceived sequel to the TOS episode The Naked Time, and it follows that up with Code of Honor, quite possibly the worst episode of any Star Trek show ever, an episode so racist that even people who worked on the show have since expressed open regret at having made it. That was the 3rd episode. And while the rest of the season never gets that bad again, it also doesn't get a hell of a lot better. Most of the worst TNG episodes are in this first season. Hide and Q, a rare, shitty TNG Q episode. Haven, the episode which first cursed the franchise with Loxana Troy. Angel 1, which plays like someone watched Code of Honor and said, let's do that again, only with sexism instead of racism. And Data Lore, which introduces one of the show's better recurring antagonists, Data's evil twin Lore, but does so while being absolutely terrible from start to finish. To be fair, The Big Goodbye, the first holodeck episode, is pretty good, and the show does start to improve slightly toward the very end of Season 1. Skin of Evil, the show where Tasha Yar is killed off, and the 3 episodes that follow it to close out the season are all much better than most of what came before. Poor Tasha. You were the necessary sacrifice. Oh, God, how I wish you did not have to die so that the series could live. Tasha! I would beat a drunken android's positronic brains out for the honor of holding your hand. God, can't imagine why it would come to that, but no, don't. Don't show her to me like that. I can't stand to see that red splotch of death on her face. It was a bad season, is my point. For many years, I considered it the worst season of Star Trek ever made. Then a few years ago, Season 2 of Star Trek Picard pulled off its own miracle. Its own black, satanic miracle. And was somehow even worse. So TNG Season 1, your burden has been lifted. Still the shittiest first season of a Star Trek show, however, and may that rock continue to hang from its neck for many years to come. This next one is not personal to me at all, but it feels like it is because it's Deep Space Nine, my favorite Star Trek show. And as the next show after TNG, it was also the first show to which the all Star Trek shows have bad first seasons rule was applied, but I object. Call me a Deep Space Nine fanboy, call me a contrarian, but one of the Star Trek-related hills I am willing to die on is this one. Star Trek Deep Space Nine's first season is not bad. It is, in fact, in my opinion, good. The series premiere, Emissary, is one of the best, if not the very best, pilot episodes in the entire franchise. It not only successfully introduces the premise and a large and diverse cast of characters, it also tells a story rooted in grief and loss, and establishes unambiguously that the hero of this show, Benjamin Sisko, hates the fucking guts of the hero of the previous show, the beloved and admired Jean-Luc Picard, sending the clear message to the audience that this ain't gonna be the same old Star Trek. After the pilot came strong episodes such as Dax, Vortex, and Progress, and Duet, one of the best episodes Deep Space Nine or any other Star Trek show ever produced. They aren't all that good, of course. The season has a few duds, but only one, The Passenger, that's the one where Dr. Bashir is possessed by the spirit of a serial killer, stands out as genuinely awful. I know some of you are saying, but Steve, what about Dramatis Personae? What about Move Along Home? Surely you think those episodes are awful too? No. Actually, I think both of those episodes are a lot of fun, and I enjoy watching them very much, and I don't give a fuck how cringe they're supposed to be. I'm not saying they're top tier, but they're entertaining. How am I not gonna like Dramatis Personae when it's got some of the greatest moments of Avery Brooks overacting in the entire series? How am I not gonna like Move Along Home when it's got Joel Brooksing all over the place? You're telling me these are considered bad episodes? What's wrong with you people? The first season of Deep Space Nine introduces us to complicated people who live in a complicated place. Bajor, the planet near which the titular space station is located, is just now emerging from a brutal, decades-long military occupation by the fascist regime of the Cardassians. The scars of that occupation reveal themselves most dramatically in Duet, but also in episodes like Progress and Past Prologue and In the Hands of the Prophets. That last one, the season finale, also dramatizes the tension inherent in the separation of church and state, as well as the clash of cultures that occurs between the Federation and Bajoran residents of the station. And that's only half of the series' premise. There's also the wormhole that is discovered in the first episode, which is home to the mysterious and powerful aliens, the prophets, who the Bajorans worship as gods, and which provides a shortcut to the far side of the galaxy. Thanks to the wormhole, Bajor goes from being dominated and isolated by the Cardassians to having seemingly the whole galaxy at its doorstep. The first season of the show deals with that in ways that are serious, as in the episode Captive Pursuit, and silly, like in the episode If Wishes Were Horses. Is it the best season of the series? No. The series gets better from there, ultimately a lot better. But no way am I going to let anyone shit talk season 1 of Deep Space Nine. Hey, I like the Defiant too, but the show didn't have to wait for that ship to arrive to get good. It was good already. That's what I say about my favorite Star Trek series, but what about the one that, for a long time, was my least favorite? What about the first season of Star Trek Voyager? This may surprise some of you who have heard my less than enthusiastic takes on Voyager before, but I actually don't think the first season is that bad. The pilot episode, Caretaker, is excellent. In fact, I'd put it right up there with Deep Space Nine's Emissary as one of the best pilots from any Star Trek series. Following that, there are several other very strong entries in Season 1. Parallax, the second episode, which isn't outstanding or anything, but presents a version of the show and the cast with the potential to grow into something genuinely compelling. The Cloud, an entertaining, character-driven story, and one of the relative handful of episodes that has the crew of the ship actually motivated by the limited resources that theoretically should have been motivating them all the time. Emanations, which, like DS9's In the Hands of the Prophets, dramatizes the tension between science and religion. Faces, which spotlights the character of B'Elanna Torres and delves into her conflicted feelings about her mixed Klingon and human heritage. And Jetrel, where the ship's resident goofball, Neelix, gets serious when he is forced to confront the man who designed a weapon of mass destruction that killed hundreds of thousands of Neelix's people. Like with DS9's first season, there are some not-so-great and forgettable episodes in there as well. Is Cathexis anyone's favorite? Unfortunately, unlike DS9's first season, there is no duet or other clear standout episode that offers a glimpse at the show's full potential either. Most of Season 1 of Voyager is just kinda there. Some episodes are better than others, but it's what I like to call perfectly acceptable Star Trek. It's generally not bad. And unlike, say, the latter few seasons of Voyager, it at least feels like the creators care about the show and are putting forth some effort to make it good. After Voyager came Enterprise, and this one is the toughest call so far. Though the first season of Voyager showed promise, by the end the series had become a parade of mediocrity, so creatively exhausted that even the actors seemed like they were mostly just showing up to get paid. And who could blame them? When Enterprise was announced, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe a new show set in an earlier era of the franchise's fictional timeline, stripped down to the basics, would be the shot in the arm the franchise needed. After a few episodes, that glimmer started to dim, and many longtime Trekkies, such as myself, began to wonder if maybe it wasn't time to give this Star Trek shit a rest for a little while. Like I said, though, this is a tough call for me because the rule I'm testing says that Star Trek shows have bad first seasons, and is Enterprise's first season bad? Bland, yes. Unremarkable, yes. Forgettable, yes. But when I look back over the episodes from season 1, only a couple jump out as genuinely terrible. One of the main things that eventually ground me down and compelled me to give up on Voyager was the sense that the show had no reason to exist other than to just make more Star Trek. Enterprise felt that way from the beginning. Despite the surface-level innovations, no Starfleet, no transporters or replicators, humanity being portrayed as the new kid on the block, galactically speaking, There is a fog of blandness hanging over the series that makes it difficult to feel strongly about it positively or negatively unless a given episode is able to chase the fog away in order to be exceptionally good or exceptionally bad. After a mostly good, not great pilot episode, Broken Bow, Enterprise's first season settles into an inoffensive but uninspired rhythm, pushing out episodes that are, fine. Occasionally, the show gets better than fine. I've always enjoyed Breaking the Ice. It's a Comet episode, and Comet episodes are almost always good. The Andorian incident is nothing all that special on its own, but it introduces Shran, who goes on to become probably the best recurring character in the series, and pushes forward the show's more complex and morally ambiguous portrayal of the Vulcans. Other times, the show shakes off the fog to go in the opposite direction, like in the infamous Dear Doctor, where Captain Archer and Dr. Phlox ultimately decide to withhold assistance from an alien species that is slowly dying of a genetic disease because Phlox decides that evolution wants them to die so that another, currently subservient species can rise in their place. It's not a terrible episode dramatically speaking, but morally, it's pretty fucked up. And also, it's not like it's a great episode dramatically speaking either. Another low point for the season is Acquisition, which is a Ferengi episode. Only at this point in the fictional timeline, humans aren't supposed to have met the Ferengi yet. So rather than A, retconning the fictional timeline so humans and Ferengi encounter each other a couple of centuries earlier, or B, just not doing a Ferengi episode, the creators choose option C and structure the episode in a tortuously contrived way so as to avoid technically violating anything in the already established canon. The team of Ferengi that boards Enterprise renders most of the crew unconscious, only interacts with Archer, Tucker, and T'Pol, and no one ever says the word Ferengi. It's like an extended game of I'm not touching you. The show would do something similar with the Borg in the season 2 episode Regeneration, but that time they get away with it because Regeneration is just a fantastic episode. Acquisition, not so much. I think I've got to call this a bad first season. I don't feel good about it like I do when I go in on TNG's fucking dog shit first season. There's nothing about Enterprise's first season that makes me actively dislike it, but there's very little that makes me love it either. There are particular aspects of the show that I love. It's got a great cast, led by Scott Bakula. Love you, Scotty Bax! And it's got fantastic production design. The interiors of this Enterprise are among my favorites from the entire franchise. I love the look and feel of the ship. I just wish I cared more about the characters that live and work on it. Enterprise hung on for 4 seasons, producing a handful of good to great episodes, but never becoming a consistently good show. Then, when it ended, Star Trek went night-night for a while. The franchise returned to the big screen 4 years later with 2009's Star Trek movie, but didn't produce another series until 2017, when Star Trek Discovery premiered on CBS, with the rest of the series being released directly to CBS All Access, the streaming service that was eventually renamed Paramount Plus, and will probably be renamed again in the next several months because Paramount's parent company is buying Warner Brothers, and they're going to Frankenstein Paramount Plus and HBO Max together into a new streaming service and probably give it a sleek, sexy new name like, I don't know, Paramount Plus with HBO Max. Anyway, Star Trek Discovery. It was a divisive show from the moment it premiered. Divisive for a few reasons, some of them respectable, some of them not. There was a segment of the fan base that reflexively rejected the show because it didn't look right. Discovery was set roughly a decade prior to the events of Star Trek, the original series, yet the design of the ship, the technology, the overall aesthetic didn't match up with TOS. And what about those Klingons? I don't find that a respectable reason for rejecting the show. Those people are babies who think baby thoughts and say baby things. There was also a segment of the fan base that rejected the show because it was too woke, which meant that there were too many women and people of color and LGBTQ characters on it. I don't find that a respectable reason for rejecting the show either. Those people are bigoted babies who think bigoted baby thoughts and say bigoted baby things, and they're way worse than the first group. As annoying as the first group is, because bigoted babies never shut the fuck up. Then there were those who didn't reflexively reject the show, but also had trouble embracing it, because it just wasn't that good. I ultimately came to regard myself as a fan of Discovery, and sitting here now, I look back fondly on the show, but to call it flawed would be an understatement. And that first season, whew, that first season was rough. For the entirety of the show's 5-season run, the creators of Discovery embraced the heavily serialized form of storytelling that is still, unfortunately, the standard for streaming shows, where each episode is a chapter in a larger story rather than its own standalone story. I'm not a fan of that format because it's so rarely done well, and as it turns out, the creators of Discovery never figured it out, though in some seasons they did a lot better with it than in others. But in season 1, the problem wasn't just how the creators of the show chose to tell their story, but what story they chose to tell. The season includes some genuinely confusing creative choices, like setting the season during a war between the Klingons and the Federation, and then showing almost none of the war on screen, despite the fact that the Starship Discovery was supposedly playing a major role. And like taking an extended multi-episode side trip into the Mirror Universe, which is where we spend almost the entire second half of the season before jumping back to the Prime Universe so our heroes can hurry up and resolve that war thing. There is at least an effort being made here. There's one mostly standalone episode involving Harry Mudd trapping the crew in a time loop, which is pretty good. There's a classic Star Trek moral dilemma involving the exploitation of a grizzly bear-sized tardigrade to make the ship's experimental spore drive work, and a handful of the characters, especially Saru and Tilly, come across as likable and compelling, but the result of that effort is frustratingly uneven. When the first season of Discovery was originally released, I was more positive in my assessment of it. I tried to focus on what worked rather than what didn't. Now that the show is complete, and now that I know it was capable of much better, seasons 2 and 4 are mostly good, at times great, though still far from perfect, I'm more comfortable saying that I think the first season was, on balance, a bad one. But not because of the look, which was great, by the way, the show always looked amazing, or because they changed the Klingon makeup. Those are baby opinions. After Discovery came Star Trek Picard, the long-awaited return of Patrick Stewart to the role of TNG's lead protagonist, Jean-Luc Picard. It had been almost 20 years since the last time Stewart played Picard in the film Star Trek Nemesis, and boy did the writers of this show come with ideas. Season 1 of Picard was about the refugee crisis that resulted from the destruction of the Romulan homeworld, and Season 1 of Picard was about the plight of former Borg and the discrimination they faced, and Season 1 of Picard was about uncovering the mysterious origins of a young woman who was actually an android, made in the image of a painting made by Data back in the day, and Season 1 of Picard was about how the Federation outlawed androids after a bunch of androids went rogue and carried out a massacre. And now there's a planet of illegal androids who are planning on summoning a tentacled robot monster from another dimension to destroy all organic life. And because the show, like Discovery, was also heavily serialized, it was kind of about all of those things all at once. Oh, and did I forget to mention the Romulan incest twins? There were also Romulan incest twins, and also 7 of 9. She's not involved with the incest twins. She's just there. Like, literally, she's just there. Someone at some point in the development of the show said, you know who should be in this? 7 of 9. And then they just had her show up a few episodes in. I can't complain about that too much, though, since when we meet Seven of Nine in season 1 of Picard, she's in a very unexpected and potentially interesting point in her life, completely disconnected from Starfleet and the Federation, operating as a kind of vigilante peacekeeper out on the frontier. It's a million billion times more interesting than where she ends up at the end of the Picard series. Potentially interesting describes a lot about season 1 of Picard. The problem is it never really gets past that point. Maybe if the creators had picked one concept to run with as the overarching story of the season, like do the Romulan refugee crisis, or do the Borg thing, or the ban on synthetic life forms instead of all of those and more, and had eased up on the serialization a bit and written more standalone episodes so we had a chance to actually get to know this older version of Jean-Luc Picard a little better, as well as the new supporting cast that surrounds him, some of who are, wait for it, potentially interesting, this might have been a better season. As it is, definitely not the worst season of the Picard series. That would be season 2. But not exactly good either. Following the debut of the Picard series came 2 new animated Star Trek shows. First, there was Lower Decks, which longtime viewers of mine may remember I actually mostly liked in its first season. I thought the premiere episode was terrific, funny, spoofing Star Trek by writing jokes based on familiar tropes and cliches rather than relying on the lazy nostalgia and borderline obsessive fascination with franchise lore that came to define the show in its subsequent seasons. The voice cast was great, and the characters were likable with character arcs that had not yet become mind-numbingly repetitive. Lower Decks Season 1 was good. I wish its creators had continued to build on that foundation instead of spending the next 4 seasons coming up with excuses for legacy cameos, replacing actual jokes with Easter eggs and references to previous Star Trek series, and becoming, as a commenter of mine once said, Memory Alpha the show. The other animated series, which debuted about a year after season 1 of Lower Decks, was Star Trek Prodigy, and holy shit, what a show. Its first season, like its second season, gets off to a bit of a slow start, but once it gets moving, it's fantastic. Unlike Discovery or Picard, the show balances season-long plots with standalone episodes, and unlike Lower Decks, when it does bring in legacy characters, it uses them for something more than a wave to the audience. Usually. I still don't really like Kobayashi, the episode which features appearances by a randomly selected bunch of legacy characters in a holodeck training program. Prodigy is aimed at a younger audience, but its plotting and characterization are better than most shows made for adults. And the best episode of its first season, Time Amok, stands as one of the most superb episodes of any recent Star Trek series. It's fantastic. As is the first season on the whole, as is the series on the whole. After Prodigy came Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the prequel to Star Trek the original series that is also a sequel to Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, none of which actually matters because the show is good. And as far as the all Star Trek shows have bad first seasons rule go, holy shit, is there a more emphatic refutation of that rule than the first season of Strange New Worlds? The first season of TOS is packed with classic series-defining episodes. The first season of DS9 is a mission statement setting that series apart from what came before and also has some terrific episodes. The first season of Lower Decks has more laughs than the following 4 seasons put together. And the first season of Prodigy is awesome once it gets past that clunky start. But Strange New Worlds comes out of the gate with a first season that is not only, to date, its best season, but that is also something no other season of any Star Trek series has ever been. Perfect. I should qualify that because that's a bold statement. When I say the first season of Strange New Worlds is perfect, I don't mean that every moment of every episode is as good as it could possibly be. I mean no bad episodes. No so-so episodes even. Every episode of Season 1 of Strange New Worlds is at least good, and a few are goddamn outstanding. The high point of the season, its fourth episode, Memento Mori, is the best episode of any Star Trek show since the heyday of Deep Space Nine, and there are a few other episodes, the Omelas-inspired Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach, the excellent Children of the Comet. Comet episodes are almost always good. That's a rule that holds up. And the wonderfully silly Spock Amok and the Elysian Kingdom are almost as good. The low point of the season is probably the last episode, A Quality of Mercy, which devotes most of its runtime to an alternate universe retelling of the classic TOS episode Balance of Terror, with Pike in command of the Enterprise instead of Kirk. And that's not remotely a bad episode, just not quite up to the incredibly high standard set by the rest of the season. In its freshman year, Star Trek Strange New Worlds is 10 for 10. The just completed first season of the newest Star Trek series, Starfleet Academy, can't boast a record that spotless, but it still does pretty damn good for itself. I just released a very long video dedicated to reviewing Season 1 of Academy, so I'm not going to go into very much detail here. If you want to hear my thoughts on the subject at length, please watch that video if you haven't already, or watch it again. Fuck it. The short version is, the first season of Starfleet Academy is excellent. Not every episode is good. One of them is fucking awful, but most of them are good, and one episode, episode 8, The Life of the Stars, is very, very good. Looking back over the first seasons of all the Star Trek shows, most of them are at least okay. Some of them are good or better than good, and really only one, Season 1 of TNG, is downright awful. I lean in the direction of bad for the first seasons of Discovery and Picard, but my feelings on both of those are still extremely mixed. Season 1 of TNG, though, to quote a guy who used to make fun of a guy who used to be president, it's bad. It's bad. That was for the kids. So, if only one show has a really bad season 1, and for some of the other shows, their first season is their best season, where did this Star Trek shows all have bad first seasons idea come from? Are my opinions that far outside the consensus of the fandom? I don't think so. My dislike of Lower Decks is definitely an outlier, but I liked the first season of Lower Decks, so that doesn't really apply here. I also disliked Season 3 of Star Trek Picard, which is contrary to the consensus opinion. But again, we're talking about first seasons, not third seasons, so that doesn't apply either. Here's why I think the Star Trek shows have bad first seasons rule came to be. And it has nothing to do with whether or not most of my fellow Trekkies agree with my opinions on the various shows. TNG's first season was bad. Almost everybody agrees on that. That is a consensus opinion. Most fans think Season 2 was bad too. I think it's a lot better than its reputation suggests, but that's neither here nor there. By Season 3, pretty much everybody agrees that the show had significantly improved. That set the expectation. Bad first season, improvement, good show by Season 3. TNG was followed by Deep Space Nine, then Voyager, then Enterprise, before the franchise went dark for a few years. All three shows that followed TNG underwent changes in either Season 3 or 4, or sometimes both. In Season 3 of Deep Space Nine, the Defiant was added, and in Season 4, Worf joined the cast. In Season 4 of Voyager, Kes left the cast, and 7 of 9 joined. In Season 3 of Enterprise, the premise of the show was reoriented around a 9/11-inspired season-long story arc, and in Season 4, the show became noticeably more prequel-ish and lore-focused than it had been before. All of those changes gave people watching the shows, especially people watching the shows long after their original broadcasts, in reruns, on DVD and Blu-ray, and eventually on streaming, an obvious point at which to say, okay, this is when the show got good. I found Deep Space Nine to be good from the beginning, but if someone watched the first season and wasn't really digging it, someone else could say, just hang in there until Season 3. Once Sisko shows up with the Defiant, that's when it gets really good. I like the character of Seven of Nine, but I don't think the overall quality of Voyager improves after she arrives. But if someone was underwhelmed by Voyager's early seasons, a Voyager fan could tell them it doesn't really get good until season 4 when Seven of Nine gets there. For me, Enterprise's year-long third season arc and fan-wank-filled fourth season failed to improve on seasons 1 and 2, but if someone watched the first season of Enterprise and was underwhelmed, an Enterprise fan could encourage them to keep watching because it doesn't start getting good until the Xindi storyline in season 3, and then season 4 is amazing. Such people are to be pitied, but the fact remains, there are such people. Anyway, the all Star Trek shows have bad first seasons rule grew out of that, I think. It started when the shows were originally being broadcast. Some folks were unimpressed by Deep Space Nine's first season for whatever reason, and someone said, hey, give it time. Remember, TNG was lousy its first season too. When Voyager came along, the same thing happened throughout much of the audience, only then there were 2 examples instead of 1. Fast forward a couple of decades, all the shows from TNG through Enterprise are complete and widely available to watch in their entireties, and that Star Trek shows have bad first seasons idea has not only become conventional wisdom within the fan base, it's influencing the expectations of new viewers. Now, people watch Star Trek for the first time expecting the first seasons of the various shows to suck, or at least knowing that first seasons have a bad reputation. That's where the rule came from. That's why people still cite it when a new Star Trek show gets off to what is perceived to be a bad start. But is it a good rule? No, I don't think so. It's definitely not a good rule now, and it wasn't even a good rule when people first started to say it back in the 90s. Star Trek The Next Generation set the tone for the future of the franchise in many ways, which is understandable, but this is yet another example of why it is now well past time to let TNG go. Except for you, Tasha. I'll never let you go, my short-haired queen! No! God! Oh, it's sadder than Hamnet. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to let you know what the subject of the next Trek Actually video is going to be, but before I do that, I want to give shout-outs to some of my newest Patreon patrons and channel members. First, the new patrons. They are Rob Burford, thanks Rob. An Enemy Spy, thanks An Enemy Spy. Daniel Maloney, thanks Daniel. Wowbagger, the infinitely prolonged, thanks Wowbagger. Brett Daniel, thanks Brett. Middle-aged Nerd, thanks Middle-aged Nerd. The Noam Chomsky, thanks The Noam Chomsky. Peter, thanks Peter. Mark Lax, thanks Mark. Tuka Nori, thanks Tuka. Max D. Wolf, thanks Max. Bill Doss, thanks Bill. And now, the new channel members. They are Haigadun, thanks Haigadun. I Was Bored 2217, thanks I Was Bored. CDN Norse Dog Dad 5119, thanks CDN Norse Dog Dad. Kaiju 1954, thanks Kaiju 1954. Turrets and Kindness, thanks Turrets and Kindness. Hamilton Holmes 1271, thanks Hamilton Holmes. Better Than Ember, thanks Better Than Ember. Peggy Peg, thanks Peggy Peg. Lachlan Jackson WS1PY, thanks Lachlan. Thomas Kelly B6E, thanks Thomas. Enterprising, thanks Enterprising. PL Bud LP, thanks PL Bud LP. Rexus King, thanks Rexus King. AZ Blue Dot 196, thanks AZ Blue Dot. OJ 397, thanks OJ 397. The Black Jubal Harshaw, thanks The Black Jubal Harshaw. Kiyoshi Frostwolf, thanks Kiyoshi Frostwolf. Blue Snake 4226, thanks Blue Snake. I'm Pickle Sue, thanks I'm Pickle Sue. Wandering Crow 1382, thanks Wandering Crow. K. Kiggins, thanks K. Kiggins. Bo Dobson 1087, thanks Bo Dobson. Pangloss 6413, thanks Pangloss. Inverse Tachyon Pulse. Thanks, Inverse Tachyon Pulse. Aisha Hoekstra, 3768. Thanks, Aisha Hoekstra. Demon J 2330. Thanks, Demon J. If you want to support this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives or clicking the join button to become a member of this channel. All patrons and members get access to exclusive posts that allow you to vote in the polls that determine upcoming Trek Actually topics, and also submit questions ahead of time for my twice monthly Ask Away live streams. If you pledge $5 a month or more on Patreon, or become a member at the $5 a month tier or higher, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. If you'd rather give a one-time gift than a recurring monthly contribution, you're always more than welcome to do that by clicking the thanks button right below the video, or via PayPal or Venmo. The links for those are in the video description. Many thanks. If you like what I do on YouTube, especially the Star Trek related stuff, you should also check out my side projects, The Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I'm on alongside Jason Harding and Amanda Billings, and Trek Reluctantly, the watch-along stream Dana Cole and I do every Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel right here. As always, links in the description. Now, for next month's Regulation Trek Actually topic, my patrons and members have spoken, and they, or a majority of those who voted in the poll anyway, want to stay in this lane for a bit longer. The scope is a lot narrower, though. This video was about evaluating the first seasons of the various Star Trek TV series. The next one will be about evaluating or re-evaluating one of the Star Trek movies. The first one of those, in fact. The topic of next month's Trek Actually video is Star Trek the Motion Picture actually a good movie? That's next month. I'll be back then and a bunch of times before then, so until the next time you see me, whenever that is, thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.